thank you, Joe, for taking time out of your schedule with us here at the Grow Givers Project to share your experience and just the invaluable contributions you've made to the community. For the fellow Grow Givers who are listening, we make an effort week in and week out to provide you with content, individuals, strategies, tactics, and experiences to help you level up and grow your business. And it's a privilege to have you with us, Joe. If you don't mind, give our audience a little bit of your background and what's most important to you at this point.
Sure. So my name is Joe Rashid. I am the executive director of East Warren Development Corp. I guess founder and executive director, because I started it as well. We're about a 6-year-old nonprofit on the far east side of Detroit. I'm a born and raised Detroiter. I'm a West Sider who lived on the east side for about 12 years, but now back on the west side, but still doing great work on the east side, right? So we are really building off a lot of the work that I've done around the city. I used to work in Southwest Detroit. I worked in Brightmoor, and now over in Morningside, East English Village, and Cornerstone Village neighborhoods on East Warren. Um, you know, basically, there's sometimes a tired narrative that's I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily a tired narrative. It's a reality, right? Downtown and Midtown are great, but what about the neighborhoods?
Mhm.
And how do we actually bring a neighborhood-based commercial corridor back? And for me, I've been spending about the past 10 years trying to figure out, okay, East Warren had great bones. It is a commercial corridor, a lot like a lot of other commercial corridors I worked on, throughout my career. But, it's just a really special place, and there's some really amazing businesses there. And so we are working on figuring out how we can kind of change that narrative of how do we actually develop a neighborhood-based commercial corridor in an equitable fashion, and so I think that's really ultimately what our goal is and what we're set out to do with our mission to support and enhance the East Warren commercial corridor and adjacent neighborhoods through collaboration, community engagement, and equitable development. And so yeah, so that's what we're up to.
I love it. I love it. So help me out a little bit because I'm really interested in your origin story,
Yeah.
right? And I was doing a little bit of reconnaissance here, something that I read and then
Mhm.
confirmed with a couple other community activists is that you actually did things a little bit differently. Normally, when I talk to a developer or somebody's involved in real estate or construction, they have these ideals in their head.
Mhm.
And then they take these ideals and make an attempt, I guess, to curate the environment around them. But what
Sure.
was interesting to me about you is you've actually spent years in the community knocking on doors. I think
Yeah.
I read somewhere and I was like, I'm not ready to say that's an exaggeration because I know I've done it.
Mhm.
But I read an article that said you knocked on 8,000 doors to figure out what people wanted in the community.
Yeah.
Talk to
No.
me a little bit. What inspired you to do that? What did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so I physically didn't knock on those 8,000 doors. That'd be great if I did. But
Okay.
we hired neighborhood residents to go out and do that surveying, right?
Okay.
And what we heard from that was, and I guess backing up from that, like I come from a community organizing background. I used to organize and do school-based organizing in the city back in the mid 2000s.
Mm.
Um, I come from kind of more of a social justice background. Um, my aunts and uncles started the Evergreen Alliance, which protested against the incinerator. My dad's issue was uh, the public financing of stadiums, and he started the Tiger Stadium Fan Club. And my mom's issue was more the closing of the Catholic churches around the city because there were centers and neighborhoods that were closing, and they in some cases were the only place offering those vital resources that a neighborhood needed. And closing those centers really decimated a lot of the neighborhoods around the city. And so I came up as part of those social justice movements, kind of. Um, coming up, and then was a community organizer for a while and have been doing, community engagement and pretty much throughout my entire career, in community development over the last 25 years or so. And and so yeah, so it was really important to knock on doors, hear from residents, what is it that they want to see. Myself and my good friend Lauren Hood, and Dr. Elena Jackson. We started a cooperative consulting firm. And as part of the East Warren Cadue planning process, we did the community engagement for that process right around the same time I was starting East Warren Development.
Hmm.
And I think that helped me listen to, over 2,000 residents throughout the planning process. And then from there, we were able to gain funding to hire residents to actually go out and do that door knocking, to provide us with that data about what people want to see. And we heard a lot of people want grocery stores and they want restaurants and um, they want coffee shops and bookstores. And a lot of what they were saying is they wanted third spaces in their community again. The East Warren commercial corridor got down to about 36% occupancy by around 2015 or 16. And so for me, growing up on the west side at 6 Mile in Livernois, a lot of, the key indicators of like what was once thriving commercial corridor were already gone when I was a kid. Like if you drove down Puritan or any of those streets, they were just shells of what they used to be. Um, but East Warren had, six operating dry cleaners. It had, like when you look at things like that, it's like, huh, there was no dry cleaner over on 6 Mile that I can remember my whole lifetime since the 80s, right?
Right.
So, having a commercial corridor that had that um, was, was something in itself. And so learning about the history of it and, and what was there, and that it was a corridor that always met the community's needs. And
Mhm.
so, how can we bring that back and it with some new flavor in a new way? We're not going to do it the exact same way that it had been done before, but how do we listen to the community and do this equitably with Black and brown developers developing the corridor, with resident, Detroiters developing Detroit, not outsiders coming in to develop Detroit, right? And so, I think
Yeah,
that's what it's all been about. And so that's what we've been trying to do over the last few years is help bring these third spaces to fruition.
I love it. You know, listening to your introduction and even listening to what you're sharing now, at the heart of every conversations I've had with you has it's always involved empowering the residents, always empowering community members to get out here and be a part of the change that they want to see.
Mhm.
What I found that oftentimes transpires is a lot of chirping, it's a lot of talking,
Mhm. Mhm.
but no one really steps up and takes action, or at least the voices that are talking the most aren't the ones who are actually the catalyst to the work that needs to be done.
Mhm.
You know, why have you been able to find success in that way? Like, what do you think is unique about your approach or just the way you've gone about doing things where you've been able to galvanize people around you and go from ideation to actually, erecting buildings and helping people start businesses?
Well, I think, it's a community first approach, right? And so I'm always trying to understand what the community wants. What I think should happen, is almost irregardless of what I hear from the residents about what they say they want. When I initially did my master's capstone on East Warren, saying like, okay, how could we do this here? I had, a two-way cycle track on one side of the street. I had, like all of these things that I was thinking through, like, oh, this is what's going to promote walkability and whatnot. And when we got to the East Warren Cadue planning process, residents were like, no, we want the exact same streetscape on both sides of the street. We want, like they were very definitive about they want. And I said, okay, and the mayor held a vote, um, and gave four scenarios for what the streetscape could be. And we knew which one the community had wanted already. We're like, this is going to be the one that they pick. And it was something like 73-3 vote in favor of the one streetscape that's now the East Warren streetscape there. And so, it's making sure residents feel like they have a voice in development. We've, even gone as far as partnering with, local CDFI like Invest Detroit to, for instance, to put an RFP out together for development of a space, and that space is now the Ribbon, which is the new development there where Little Liberia and Aura Vibe Studio are going. And there were 10, over 10 submissions to that. They allowed East Warren Development the grace to put together a list of an advisory committee of residents to help select that developer for that site. And there were over 10 developers that applied, and it got narrowed down to four, and Eddie won that development. And but giving residents a voice in that, development process is a really crucial piece of it all.
So getting their investment, because
Right.
obviously if they don't feel like they're a part of the process,
Right.
they're either going to be lukewarm or I'd imagine find a lot of creative and fascinating ways to gum up the project,
Yep.
if
Yep.
you will. So, okay, I hear that loud and clear. And then, of course, I'm hearing the fact that you've brought organizations that have funding to provide monetary incentives for people to actually get involved in these projects that you're in.
Yeah.
Um, you know, when we had a conversation a number of weeks ago, when I actually came out there, I think you have a weekly kind of, walk the community, folks can come out and chat and converse with the staff there.
Mhm.
The thing that was really intriguing to me were the business owners I had a chance to converse with, right? And just the diversity of people who were there and present and excited about what's going on there.
Yeah.
For me, coming from the B2B side,
Mhm.
one of the questions I thought as I was sitting there was, okay, so we have this development taking place. We have spaces being erected. We're going to put business owners in these spaces.
Mhm.
And then I immediately started thinking about sustainability, right?
Right.
What's being put in place to ensure that these business owners have a successful run at it, right?
Yeah.
And also, not only are there resources and frameworks being made available, but some of these deals that these business owners are cutting to secure funding to get in these buildings. Like, what does that process look like? What frameworks are being put in place to give them the best chance to have success?
Yeah, so I mean, I think first and foremost, one thing that is a little different about East Warren Development is we put a developer assistance program in place. So we will walk side by side with someone who wants to develop in a community-oriented way, that is, a Detroit resident or someone who just has shown up and been in Detroit, showing that they're want to be part of the community, right?
Mhm.
Um, and we will sign a representation agreement with them to garnish trust amongst funders in that development initially, right? And walk through that process with them together, help them build their capital stack, maybe even put together a rough pro forma for them to, just begin that conversation. And then from there, it's, offering differentiated support. So do they need legal support? So how do we get them legal support? Do we need, um, marketing support? Do you need, really anything that runs the gamut? And our job is to help them navigate, right? We are a navigator. We are not an expert in, you know, traditional development. I'm not like someone who comes at it from, numbers guy, as a numbers guy. I come at it from a community standpoint. And so,
Mhm.
but I know how to get in the door and begin that conversation. And then I can help you get to a technical service provider that can actually provide you with that final level of technical assistance you need to get your development off the ground. And then I think once that development is open, we are always there to be that champion and work with them through that. We want to check in with you weekly, monthly, whatever you need to be able to make sure your business is successful. And our businesses know that. They call me all the time. Hey Joe, this is happening. This is happening. We find ways to support them. Um, but they have to reach out. Like I don't know. I'm not a mind reader all the time. So
Mhm.
on occasion something can happen. But I think we try to. It doesn't guarantee success. But I
Mhm.
think with our approach and how we're actually trying to, um, intentionally support businesses, they're a lot more likely to succeed. Being in business isn't an easy thing. It's sometimes a really lonely thing too. And so we try to help build systems of support around our businesses to be able to support them as best as possible. Um, we even joke that our once a business is open, it's our job to basically be the Flavor Flav of East Warren. We got to be that hype man, right? We got to just help get the word out about these businesses because they've got a really great concept and they're trying to do something. And so it's our job to, promote the events that they have going on or promotions that they're doing or things like that. Um, on top of just making sure that we can help them navigate to the resources that they need.
So talk to me a little bit, like what does the process look like, right? A business owner or an aspiring business owner that's looking to navigate this process. So somebody's been ideating on an ideal, maybe they get their tax refund, or maybe they decide, you know what, I'm going to take some money out the 401k, whatever the case may be, right?
Yep.
And they end up getting in contact with their organization and they say, I'm ready to start a business. What
Yep.
does the process look like to get them going?
So, I mean, with every business, it's a little bit different. Like
Hmm.
we don't put a rigid process in place intentionally, right?
Mm.
So I typically say, first step, come up to Food Truck Friday. That happens at 16835 East Warren on from 12 to 2. We'll have some of our staff members there. Sometimes that initial step is like, I don't know where to begin. Where do I begin? And then we navigate them to Build or Prosperous or Tech Town or any other business development entity that they might need to be able to develop their business plan and actually take those next steps, right? But then if they already have, some of that already together and whatnot, then what we do is um, I'll say, okay, do you know what size space you're looking for? What are you trying to accomplish here? Are you looking on East Warren? Are you looking somewhere else? We'll help connect them to the right community development organization in another area if they're not looking on East Warren. If they're looking at East Warren, I like to take them on a walking tour, really
Mhm.
understand who they are, what they're trying to do, what their intentions are, to help them, be able to navigate that space. And because a lot of times, especially on these commercial corridors, um, not everything is listed for sale, but you might know who the owner is. And we've spent that time actually developing the relationships and figuring out who owns what within the corridor, so we can say, okay, well, this isn't listed for sale, but we know that this person's interested in seeing this building developed.
Mhm.
Can't say that we know a price even, but here's their contact information. Feel free to reach out, and then we'll work with you through that process. In some cases, there's a couple city-owned buildings, or maybe you know, a friendly developer owns it but isn't looking to develop it themselves. So, it just kind of depends. And we walk them through that process and help them kind of figure out like what's that type of space that they're looking for. And sometimes, like Next Chapter Books, for instance, they wanted to just pop up. I'd played softball with them back in like 2011 or 12. They wanted to, pop up on the corridor at the farmers market, and we did that for a couple sessions and whatnot. But I really said to them, like, why don't you just pop up in the Alger Theater for about 6 months and just see if this is something the neighborhood will jive with and really work for them. And And it did, and then we helped them find their location, and so that's been a really great, staple. Books are destination retail business, and so the more you can kind of fill those gaps in with those destination retail businesses, the better. But it didn't start out like, okay, they'll sign a lease. It was like, let's test this out first in some way or shape or form to actually get it going.
I like it. So you're really taking people through the beta testing process.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm hearing repeatedly, you are making sure that part of that beta testing or stress testing is that the community is going to be receptive and excited to have you there.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, and the farmers market is the beta test, right? And it's the
Mhm.
beta test, and we're not typically bringing a ton of businesses from outside for the farmers market. But what we're doing is letting, really seeing, Detroiters were hustlers. We there's all sorts of, great businesses that are happening in the neighborhood. But they're kind of the side gig, right? Well, but a lot of these people want them to be their main gig. And so the farmers market's kind of that first step. And then from the farmers market, what's that next step? And sometimes it's going into a licensed commercial kitchen. Sometimes it's going into a brick and mortar business. And so we started the East Warren Commercial Kitchen as kind of that additional entry point for food-based businesses, so that we can help support our local food-based businesses, along the corridor and grow that, because that's something we heard back when we surveyed the 8,700 homes, that people want sit-down restaurants. They want places to go eat. Um, and so if we can't help our neighborhood-based businesses actually get to that point, we're not doing a service. It's great that we have some incredible restaurants coming, but how do we make sure these other businesses have that same opportunity? And so we need to help them grow and scale too.
I like it. I like it. What's been some of the biggest challenges to making this vision come to fruition for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always two steps forward, one step back.
Hmm.
But you're moving forward, right? And so I think that with that, it can be any number of things that can get in your way, right? You might think you're buying an entire, the entire parking lot, for the Pizza Hut that we bought, right? But you only bought one of the three parcels, so now it takes you 3 years to acquire all the land to do what you wanted to do. It might be that ownership of one of those lots changes in the middle of it, right? It might
Hmm.
be that DTE has a line that goes right under where your development goes, and they forgot to mention it in plan review. So now you are delayed by 6 months for that. So you never know, right? Doing development in Detroit is not for the faint of heart. You have to be a really resilient personality to be able to deal with that, because I definitely have a few more gray hairs than I had at the beginning of this process going through it, right? But that being said, it can be tremendously rewarding. And seeing the community come out and support the farmers market, seeing the community come out and support these food trucks, and seeing, some of the new businesses like the Savoy or Detroit Pepper Company or Morningside Cafe, filled up with patrons is just like, that's a huge reward in itself, right? And so that's really the ultimate goal, is to build density on this corridor to the point where, these businesses are just thriving. And sometimes these businesses are a little bit on an island right now. And so that's part of getting the development happening, so we can create the density needed to be able to really support businesses here on East Warren.
So something I've heard you share repeatedly, you're using words like density.
Hmm.
Um, um, you're using language like businesses that, and I'm just going to change the diction a little bit for the average Joe, but you're really speaking about creating businesses that create traffic,
Yeah.
right? That contribute to that destination
Hmm.
businesses, if you
Hmm.
will,
Hmm.
right? And I know you're not in the business of telling people what type of businesses they should start, but I
Sure.
also know you have enough business acumen to know that, look, there are certain businesses that I would call anchors that
Yeah.
you have to have in any community to really make it grow, bring that foot traffic, bring that interest. So
Mhm.
for an aspiring entrepreneur who is in Detroit Metro, and maybe even specifically listening in over there by East Warren, what kind of businesses would you encourage or invite people to start?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, our model has been we're starting with food,
Mhm.
food first. So food-based businesses drive foot traffic. It's just that's the nature of the game. And so you start with food, you build in with destination retail. So we have um, uh, next chapter books, and we have a couple of the ceramic artists from Pewabic who are looking to open Detroit Ceramic Works, because who knew that there was no distributor for pottery supplies within 100 miles of Detroit.
Mhm.
But it can also be all sorts of other businesses, right? I mean, sometimes you don't really know it until you actually hear what the vision and their plan is for their business. But I think if they're community oriented, if they have a clear vision of what they're trying to do and a clear route to being a profitable business, we're open to a conversation to kind of figure it out. I don't think there's any one type of business that we're looking for, right? But I think ultimately, I guess if I had to generalize it, it's East Warren was always a corridor that met the community's needs, right? So how do we make sure that whatever we're bringing to the corridor is something that's going to meet the community's needs? And so that's really ultimately at the end of the day what we're trying to do is find those businesses that can help support our community in a more intentional way. And sometimes that's books, sometimes that's clay, sometimes that is t-shirts. It just depends. Um, but ultimately, um, we are just there, like we don't control all the real estate on East Warren, and we don't want to. It's really intentional that we want a diversity of developers and entrepreneurs on our corridor. We really I think the big thing for us is what can we do to help people own property in on their own commercial corridor? And so the more neighborhood driven businesses we can have, the better. We're not looking for big box stores. We'll let, some of the other streets around have those big box retailers. We want a great eclectic mix of local neighborhood driven businesses. And so that's really ultimately at the end of the day what we're looking for. And if it's a neighborhood resident that's opening a business, I trust that them as a resident, they know their community. Just
Mhm.
so they know their target audience, they know their demographic, and if they need to, they're not 100% sure if they can work or not. Well, then come test it out at the farmers market. It's a great way to do it. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be going into a you know, $200,000 build out to be able to figure out that you actually have a successful business. You can do
Mhm.
it for a few hundred at the farmer's market, right? Which is a much lower lift. And then we can work our way up to actually having that $200,000 build out if that's a path that they want to go.
Yeah. So you've painted a picture in terms of maybe what some of the challenges are on a micro level, right?
Mhm.
Just the everyday operations of establishing a business and revitalizing the corridor.
Mhm.
What challenges do you think entrepreneurs and business owners need to be aware of on a macro level, right?
So I think the big thing to really understand is that outside of downtown and midtown, um, commercial corridors in Detroit aren't really bankable. And I guess the
Mm,
easiest way to digest that is, back around 2012, majority of our housing stock wasn't bankable.
hmm
So thinking about it, like you had to be at about a $50,000 threshold for a mortgage company to want to give you a mortgage, right?
hmm
And if you weren't at a $50,000 level, which because of the foreclosure crisis, a lot of Detroit wasn't, um, then your neighborhood sat in this area where only cash buyers could actually operate. And when that happens, then you have a lot more, investors and things like that that have are building up in your neighborhood and not as many homeowners, which creates an imbalance compared to where it used to be. And that's happened on pretty much all of our commercial corridors in the city, right? Where
hmm
it's investors coming in with cash. You can't go to a bank and get a loan. And so that is the challenge. And so you have to work with community development financial institutions to be able to actually um, you know, do the development on these commercial corridors. So, community development financial institutions are nonprofit banks. For anyone that doesn't know,
hmm
that have gotten dollars typically allocated to them by banks that have Community Reinvestment Act dollars to invest in riskier areas. It's almost like a form of redlining in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately what happened, downtown and midtown at one point weren't bankable either. And they still are, sometimes teeter on whether they are bankable or not. But
Yeah.
the goal is to get to get a commercial corridor to a bankable level where you can go to a traditional bank and just get a loan to open up your business. You can go to the SBA. You can do things like that, where you don't have a huge financial gap to be able to actually get your business off the ground. Um, and so there's this fund right now that's in 10 neighborhoods called the Strategic Neighborhood Fund, that is operating in 10 different areas. I can list a few, probably not all 10, but East Warren, Jefferson Chalmers, Gratiot 7 Mile, Banglatown, Island View, um, um, Verner in Southwest Detroit, um, uh, Russell Woods, Livernois 6 Mile, Grand River 6
hmm
Mile. So those are really the main ones that are out there. There's probably one or two I'm missing there, but uh, I think West Warren is one too. But those neighborhoods all have been the city worked to basically get a corporate sponsor that will basically provide that gap financing for
Yep.
these developments. And I think that's really important if you're looking at doing development in the city. It's like understanding where are these CDFIs actually investing their dollars and layering that out and mapping out where they're investing their dollars, because that's where, if like if you're trying to develop on Puritan, I don't really know of anywhere on Puritan that actually has CDFI investment really coming hard into Puritan, right? So
Right.
but if you're looking at 6 Mile, there's a few, and if you're looking at Livernois, there's a few, and if you're looking at East Warren, there's a few, right? And so you find ways to get those dollars to start to flow, and the ultimate goal of those dollars is really to help to get that the theory is if you can get 15 to 20 developments off the ground on a commercial corridor and
Mm.
bring that investment level back to a reasonable point where that closes the gap on that financing to be able to get that happening. And so then all of a sudden, the traditional market can step in again. And that's really what what you want to see happen, is the traditional market will step in and banks will lend again and other things will happen. But we're battling, really 75 years of disinvestment in the city. And so that is, I think, just really important to like fully understand. And in doing this, we're trying to undo 75 years of disinvestment.
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, so I think that's kind of how I come at it is like, this has been a inherent problem that we're trying to solve for here for years. And how do we reverse that cycle that of 75 years of disinvestment that's plagued the city?
So just the way I'm interpreting it, the way
Yeah.
it's landed on me as I listen to you, is a lot of this activity, particularly involving the CDFIs, is almost like a defibrillator,
Hmm.
right? They're basically jump starting the process, right? They're bringing the heartbeat back.
Right.
So traditional models, if you will, or methodologies can work again in certain
Right.
communities.
Yep.
You know, one of my biggest concerns is this, and I'd be curious to know how you respond to it,
Hmm.
um, because I'm very much still gung ho about Detroit. I was telling a handful of people that I work with that aside from maybe 5 or 6 other cities in the United States, I believe Detroit still provides one of the best investment opportunities you're going to find. Whether
Right.
that be real estate, starting up businesses, I just think there's so much potential
Yeah.
here, and the ground is so fertile
Yeah.
to eyeballs that are open minded and willing to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
But my other concern is this, right? Because I lived for years, and my stumping grounds for years was downtown Detroit, midtown Detroit.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I saw what it was and the transition of what it is today,
Right.
right?
Right.
Most people would say is a burgeoning example of what you would want in a metropolis, depending on your
Hmm.
socioeconomic situation,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I tell people, there's a rising tide in Detroit. I see it clear as day. Um, a rising tide does lift all ships, but only if you have your boats in the water.
Right.
And my biggest concern right now is that I know a lot of these people who left Detroit 20 years ago who are returning with
Hmm.
capital,
Hmm.
experience, know-how, connections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Those are the ones whom I see are winning. And then, of course, where I lived at, I was surrounded by New Yorkers. I was surrounded by people from Texas. I was surrounded by people from Florida. I was surrounded
Hmm.
by people from Wisconsin. I was surrounded by people from, all these different states who are
Hmm.
relocating here to Detroit. And I'm
Sure.
not mad with them. They're doing what
Right.
I would do if I had capital and resources, you know,
Right.
found fertile ground and could get it
Yep.
at a discount and it's mad arbitrage. I'm gonna do it too.
Hmm. Hmm.
But um, I don't see enough Detroiters who've been here 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years putting their boats in the water and participating.
Yeah.
What's your message to them? Like what do people need to do?
Yeah.
What
So
do they
I
need to come to the table with or be prepared to do?
Yeah, so I think, ultimately for me, um, it's like for years it was outsiders developing Detroit for
Mm-hmm.
years, right? And I've found that that's shifted over the last 5 to 10 years, especially.
Mm-hmm.
And that like one of those programs that there's, I guess, two programs I look at that really help you understand how to play the game and do it.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I would really suggest that anyone who's interested go through and research one of these programs. One is Chase Cantrell's Building Community Value program. Um,
Base Cantrell.
Building community value. Chase is a really great guy, great friend of mine. I went through that program. I try to put all my full-time staff through that program so that they
Mm-hmm.
understand how Detroiters can develop Detroit. Above everything else, you're building a network of other Detroiters that are looking to do the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one helps you understand how to navigate those hoops and things like that, but you're building your own support system and network there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, Brandon and Damon, who are developing the deco down the street from our office, is you know, Brendan Hodges and Damon Dickerson and Tribe Development. You know, Brandon was an advisor in the class. Damon was an architect who was going through the class, and now there are developers on that. Eddie Carrington, who I mentioned earlier from the Ribbon, also went through that program. Eddie also went through the other program that I'll mention, and that is the Equitable Development Initiative through Capital Impact Partners.
The
Um,
Equitable Development Initiative.
Yep. And so
Okay.
those are two programs that are designed to help Detroiters develop Detroit, right? So I think those are really two of the most impactful programs you can go through if you're looking to do development and do it right. And and then I think, and then if you're looking at small business support, then you got to look at your Prosperous, Tech Town, Build Institute, and those types of programs, right? There's plenty of others out there, but those are three of the bigger ones that you can, access pretty frequently to be able to actually, if you're looking to develop a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those two programs in themselves are really key to it. And then if you're like, well, you mentioned these CDFI things, what CDFIs are out there and what are they funding and whatnot. You can type in on Google, just type in CDFI Grid Detroit, and that will give you a list of all the CDFIs who are working in Detroit and what they actually fund. Some fund housing, some fund early childhood, some fund mixed use development, some just our small business development. And some will give grants, some will give loans, and so you can start to kind of figure out what it is that you're looking for. And then, stop by and, talk to me. I can help you kind of navigate through some of these hoops and hurdles too. But also just like look up where the community development organization in your neighborhood is. If you have a specific neighborhood that you're trying to get something going in, almost every neighborhood, almost every neighborhood in the city has some type of community development organization that's supporting those neighborhoods. And so that's really, a great place to start is just to start to have that conversation, meet with your local representatives too, is a really great way to do that. But I think that's really how you can really get a lay of the land and figure out what's happening around the city.
Yeah. Last question, and like I said, I'm just curious because I'm gonna get as much out of you as I can in terms of frameworks and thinking about how to position yourself to have success in this current environment.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something I've been mulling around thinking about a lot. And I'm not one of these doomsday people, right? When it comes to AI and technology, but I am acutely aware of the fact that it's going to be extremely disruptive. And I had a conversation once again with a group of business owners, and I shared with them how, it took decades for us to transition from a horse buggy to driving vehicles, right? And so in that period of time, generations kind of had an opportunity to adjust to the changing conditions. But even during that period, we still had a depression. We had recessions, the whole 9 yards. It was rocky, right? And now when you look at AI and what's going on in that space, it's not going to be decades. Like it's literally going to change the landscape and how we live in a matter of maybe some people say the next 2 years, maybe definitely next 5-7 years. It's going to be dramatic.
Right.
So it's not like you're going to have people who have the opportunity to pivot and make the adjustment in such a short amount of time. And my biggest concern, the flip side, I'm very excited about it, is I really feel like most people, AI is still brand new to them. It's been here forever, but in terms of actually engaging in technology, it's still brand new to everybody. It's kind of like a level playing field.
Sure.
But my concern is that, and I'll just say Detroiters, quote unquote, my biggest concern is that I don't think Detroiters really realize that if you don't get a handle on this thing, you don't learn how to utilize these tools, or if you don't put yourself out front on the cutting edge of learning and introducing these tools and creating businesses around them, you're gonna go the way to dinosaur.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm curious to know with not individuals in your circle, the conversations you're having with entrepreneurs and business owners and people in the community, whether that's like on the tip of their tongues, that is that top of mind. Because I'm not reading the newspaper, I'm not having conversations in community groups
Sure.
where people are really talking about this, at least
Sure.
not in my circles.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, like we've done a few programs. We have a kind of a program at East Warren Development called Let's Get Digital East Warren,
Mhm.
that is really about helping our entrepreneurs like navigate how to get to get online and actually digitize their business in different ways.
Mhm.
Um, things are changing very rapidly, as you're saying. So, like, the more that changes, the more you have to, try to keep up with it and go. At the same time, you know, some of it is just still just figuring out and grinding, right? As
Mhm.
a business owner and figuring things out. The one thing that's not going to change is people are going to need to eat. So if you have good food, people are gonna have to figure out how to eat. And it might mean that you gotta add DoorDash or Uber Eats when you were more reluctant to do that at first. Um,
Mhm.
but you find ways to adapt to the changing times for even for restaurants or something like that, right? And so I think that like um, continue to find ways to be innovative in your approach. But that can look a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
And you can, your existing customers, you can, do, you know, just old school surveys about how they would like to, receive information or what they need to do. I have, one of our businesses, Stacy's 2 Day Tea, where she sends text alerts every day she's out somewhere to just make sure her customers know this is where I'm going to be out at this farmer's market or at this event, to just let them know that she's going to be there. And while that's not, AI driven or anything like that, a text message is a really effective form of communication these days. And
Yes.
everyone's got their phone for everything. And so you find ways to adapt your business to be able to drive foot traffic and drive your customers to the spaces that you are present at. And so I think that is, a really great example of how you can just kind of just, like how do people communicate? What are they doing? Figure out like a innovative way to stay on top of things.
Okay. Last but not least, and I'll let you go. I
Mhm.
know we're running up on it.
Yep.
Um, are there any specific projects or initiatives you would like business owners and aspiring business owners to be aware of
Yeah.
moving forward, like over the course of the next, 6 months, a year, 3 years, that people can
Yeah.
get excited about?
Yeah, so I mean, East Warren is about to, have probably the best food in the city. And I don't mean to toot my own horn or anything like that, but
Mhm.
so East Warren Development, we're opening the East Warren Commercial Kitchen, turning an old Pizza Hut into 3 commercial kitchens with a
Mhm.
pass-through window, so we can do, DoorDash, Uber Eats, or if there's a festival or our farmers market, they you can just have the menu outside and people can come up and order, right? So different ways to make that happen. But Bob Ebb Fair is opening their second location by us. La Jaliense is going to open their third location, great Mexican restaurant from Southwest Detroit. Little Liberia is probably going to be the next restaurant that opens in the Ribbon. We have Cash Only that's going between Corville, I'm sorry, between 3 Mile and Bedford on East Warren, Cone Vecinos, which is going to be a soft serve ice cream spot. Chef Omar from Saffron des Trois is looking at opening 2 restaurants. And so things are really going to change. And we already have the Savoy, which has steak, seafood, and jazz on the corridor, and great carryout places like Detroit Pepper Company on the corridor as well. So,
Mhm.
there's going to be a really um, wide variety of things happening. And then next door to the old Pizza Hut, we're developing the East Warren public market. And so it'll be a four-season farmers market with, small micro retail spaces in it as well. And then the second floor will be supportive services for business. We'll also have a small grocery store that will mainly just be prepared foods and local produce. Just grab and go items and whatnot for our community, but healthier options. And and I think the big thing is, so one, we have our farmers market every Thursday from 5 to 8. So tonight and every Thursday we have the farmers market through the end of September. Once the new buildings open, it will be year round. And then we have Food Truck Fridays happening till the end of October. And we have East Warren Fest coming up on September 13th. So East Warren Fest is our response to the nostalgia that our community, when you heard people who grew up in the neighborhood talk about the neighborhood, they were talking about, man, the one thing they always think back on is this parade that the East Warren Business Association that used to be around on East Warren used to do. And like all the Little League kids would participate and everything. There was such nostalgia around it. And while we weren't going to be able to do the same thing and have that same nostalgia in the same way, we wanted to provide an event that could provide similar nostalgia and
Mhm.
similar neighborhood pride. And so East Warren Fest is our response to that. And so this will be the third year of East Warren Fest this year, happening September 13th from 4 to 9. We partner with Decipher, which is a great music super collective on three music stages. And then we're adding a car show this year. Where we have a kids zone. We have a lot of really fun, different ways to do things. We should have two businesses opening that day. And so it's just a really great celebration of what's happening on East Warren. And it's just a really amazing time. We had over, 8 to 10,000 people come out last year. We hope this year's even bigger and better. And so we're doing everything that we can to provide, really a tremendous space on the corridor where, family-friendly environment in the neighborhood where everyone can kind of come out and enjoy themselves. So those are our the upcoming things on East Warren that I'm most excited about.
I love it. I love it. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So for individuals who want to get plugged in to the ecosystem,
Yep.
right? Learn more about what you're doing, learn more about these events,
Yep.
just kind of keep their ear to the streets. I know I heard Fridays is still transpiring, so I believe I'll
Yep.
probably be there tomorrow.
Yep.
What else is going on where people can plug in?
Yeah, so I would also say that you can go to ewarren.org. You can email me at joe@ewarren.org. You can visit any of our social media. We typically have a link tree with all the different links to the different programs and things
Mm,
that are happening just by scanning the QR code on any of our social media accounts. And so there's a lot of different ways to plug in. Detroit has probably one of the most amazing entrepreneurial ecosystems in the city, in the country, to be able to, in terms of small business support. But you need to know how to tap in, and we're one of those resources that can help you tap into that to be able to help grow your business.
I love it. Well, I appreciate your time, Joe. As you probably know, I have a million other questions I would like to ask.
Yeah.
So I'll end up shaking your hand here in the near future to get some of those questions answered, and hopefully next time we can visit with you here on the Grow Givers podcast. We can be talking about some of these updates and new happenings that are occurring. But I thank you again for your time. I mean, as always, your conversation and wisdom and the impact you made in the community is invaluable. And I want you to know we appreciate it.
Yeah.